I am here today with John and Mark from MakerFlo, and we are going to be chatting all about tariffs. And we know that this can be kind of a controversial subject, but we thought it was really important to talk about it in relation to the craft industry because it is really affecting our industry, and we can put our blinders on and just not pay attention to it, but then it's going to get us in the wallet. So we decided we would chat about it today. If you are here, let us know where you are tuning in from. We're going to give people a few minutes to sign on just because we didn't have a live link to start this. So I know people are going to have to come find this video as it's going. So if you are here, tell us where you're from. You can always ask us questions over in the chat. We ask, because this is sort of a sticky topic, that you keep everything kind and peaceful in the comments. We would really appreciate that, but we are here to answer questions. So if you have questions about tariffs, especially if how they relate to the craft industry, we are here to answer those questions. I do want to wait like a few minutes before everybody signs on. So I can't tell from my end if there are even people here. There we go. Now I'm getting some comments. So I'm seeing some people. So that's great. I'm glad you guys found this video. But yeah, so we're going to be chatting. And Mark and John, do you guys want to introduce yourselves and tell the people what MakerFlo is?
Yeah, absolutely. I can kind of get started. So I'm not sure if everyone's heard of us or not, but at MakerFlo, we've been around for, we just started basically pre-COVID. And we were, crafters ourselves. We started, in Mark's house, actually in his garage, to be more, actually in the corner of his garage, if I was really, where we started, because he still had cars in there. So we had a little, I think, 10 by 3 square foot space that we started our little business with both with his cars and stuff in there. So yeah, we started that journey a long time ago, and we were selling women's shoes, and that one thing led to another. And then we basically became, a supplier for in the crafting space for sublimation blanks, for engraving blanks, and things like that. So it's a 10-year story. That's for another time. But basically, we're crafters at heart, and we supply in the craft space, and we're very proud of that, and we enjoy it a lot because it allows us to sort of really use that, be creative, and sort of use our knowledge from the years, and do creative, exciting things, and create these products that small businesses or hobbyists can use and enjoy using. So yeah, so I think you've used some of our blanks like tumblers or luggage tags and things like that. So that's kind of what we do at MakerFlo, and I'm one of the founders, and so yeah, so my name is John, and one of the things that I do for MakerFlo is I handle a lot of like the business development, like our partnerships, working, with a lot of folks in the space, like Corey and Angie and a few other folks to see how we can partner up and bring the best value for the industry. So that's kind of what I do. So I'll give it off to Mark.
Yeah, I'm Mark, and John and I have been business partners for, I think, over 15 years.
Yeah.
And although MakerFlo was started in 2019, we go way back to actually middle school and high school, then started our first business together in college. So a lot of fun stories we can share with you guys. My role here at MakerFlo, and I do a lot of the web design, the user experience, the product ordering, the logistics of that, and also the sales and marketing too. So John and I, although we're partners, we both kind of do a little bit of everything. So we kind of piggyback and ping pong off each other's to make the best decision.
Try to. And by the way, if you see us looking in the side of the screen randomly, it's because we're sitting next to each other. So yeah. So that's why we keep looking to the side. If you're wondering why they're looking left or right, so that's the reason.
It almost looks like you guys are sitting actually next to each other, like the way that the split cam works. It looks
yeah.
like
Let me show you guys. We don't go very far. There he is. See?
Very nice. This is awesome. So if you guys are just joining us, we're kind of just giving an overview of what we're doing here. Today, we're here to talk about tariffs as they relate to the craft industry. We feel like it's really important to kind of talk about this because, again, like I said earlier, you can kind of, put on your blinders and hope everything's going to be okay, or we could kind of confront things the way they are and figure out how we can mitigate, the costs that we are getting. And we're gonna talk about a whole bunch of different things today. I have a bunch of questions for these guys. Plus I have my own experience so far with tariffs. So you can always ask questions over there in the chat if you're watching this live. If you're not watching this live, then you can leave comments on the YouTube video and we can come back and answer them later. I do want to say that it is April 17th at 1:05 p.m. Pacific time. And this is how things are in this moment, and things are going to change because they have been changing and nothing stays the same right now. So what we're saying here isn't necessarily 100% going to be applicable, but we will be sharing wider things that you can think about as these sorts of things change over the upcoming months. So if you have any questions, please leave those for us. But if not, I'm going to go ahead and give the first question here to Mark and John, which is, we have so much back and forth sort of nature of these new tariffs, right? They're on, they're off. They're like this, oops, excuse me. They're this much for this country. They're this much for this. We're adding to this. And it's causing so much confusion. And so can you kind of speak a little bit to why this is so confusing and how it's affecting the craft industry because of the sort of chaotic nature of the tariffs right now?
Yeah, I could start off with that one. I think you sort of answered the question in your question. No, seriously, that's really what it is. So whether it's our understanding of where the tariffs are, well, let's just take that for example. If you ask me what the tariff is currently at right now, I have to deep dive and see truly where it's at, what the dates are, like what is actually implemented, what isn't, and I think there's a lot of that going on. If it's happening with you as a business owner, I'll tell you right now, it's happening throughout the industry at every level of business that's being done. So if you ask, for example, like we just asked our broker, we sent them a question about it 3 days ago, we haven't had a response. And that's very unusual. Usually like you'll email and you get an email back like, hey, I'm importing this product. What are my costs? What are my tariffs? We haven't heard from them in 3 days, which basically tells us they're unsure about the product that we sent and what the tariff is going to be. And so I think every level that you go with, everyone is a bit confused. And so to give you another example, a more real example of what I mean is, we just got a shipment come in a week ago, and we had no idea what the tariff was going to be on the shipment. So it's sort of that kind of uncertainty, whether you ask the shipper overseas, like, hey, what do you think the cost will be? They're saying that, well, we can tell you, but it's going to change. It might change. So it just all varies. And because of the tug of war nature, because it is changing so fast, your shipment could be en route. And if the tariff is implemented and changed, it could even change by the time it reaches the customs border, which is when usually you get hit with that tariff, or at least that's when we get hit with it. So I think, like I said, the answer is sort of in your question is, because of the swift nature of it, I think everyone is a bit confused, or everyone, we don't know when these things are going to happen. And when the first time this happened, the first, I think, delay that they did was because the border at the border, they were like, hey, this is too fast. We can't even adjust our processes to process all this, right? And that was like one of the first reasons why it was delayed. So I don't know if you want to add anything else.
I mean, with any business owner, it's hard to plan and make decisions when there's just so much uncertainty, right? There's different ways of shipping things too, whether you're prepaying taxes or whether you're paying a tax when it comes into the country. And that's the whole confusion of like, okay, when have certain taxes been implemented, at what date, and when are they going to be implementing that? When it ships, when the documentation is created, or when it arrives, or when it's in the middle of the ocean, or what? Like, what's going on? And so there's a lot of confusion on that, which makes it hard for businesses to make that decision on what are we doing? Are we ordering more? Are we ordering less? Are we changing prices? How do we change prices? And where do we go from here? So that's kind of causing that tug of war effect.
So I see that there's a comment that came through, and I would love to address that a little bit and give a little bit of background, a little bit of dynamic on the kinds of questions and decisions that we have to work with. So with the nature of the tug of war, one of the big issues we're having now is we have this set inventory, and it came in at a certain cost, and a lot of the suppliers out there, they have shipments that were already en route, and they're getting hit with various taxes that we don't understand yet, like when it hits what the price increases will be. And so there's a lot of suppliers out there that are already raising prices because they know that the incoming tariff, if they truly raised it to the amount that it's supposed to be, it's going to be an absolute shock. Like, for example, if somebody had 7% tariff and now it's 150%, that price increase could be like if a product is $10, it could now be 25. So an approach that a lot of suppliers might be doing is like, hey, we'll step it up slowly. So we'll raise the current inventory's price a little bit, and then, you know, as we approach that crazy shipment, it won't be as hardcore of a punch in the face, because it is like, for your business, could you imagine if something costs you 10 and now it costs you 22? You would kind of step back and go like, oh, whoa, that I didn't even get a runway to raise prices. It just came so hard at me. So that's kind of one issue, is like when to do that, how to do that. And so that's been an issue. And another issue is, let's say if you do have a lot of inventory and you get mixed inventory, you have to raise the prices at some point. So like, for example, we have inventory, for example, the decanters, we just had a shipment come in. Well, I have pre-tax inventory and I have post-tax inventory, and it gets very confusing on, okay, now the inventory is a little bit mixed up. How do we move forward with raising prices? Do we move it, to the full extent? Well, but that's not fair because we have pre-tax inventory. So we just don't move it as much as, we should if we just had the post-tax inventory. So there's multiple ways of looking at it, and it gets with inventory, it becomes a little confusing, especially for businesses our size, because you have to understand there's 1,500 SKUs. So even though I give one example, there's so many different products coming in. There's so many different products at different existing levels, and there's only so much of. So it's a very complicated process, and at the speed that's happening, it's even more complicated.
I think some people are also, maybe they're raising prices now so that they can afford that shipment when it comes in, because they may not have the however much,
and that's and you hit that right on the head. So to give a very good example of that, I'll give a real example. We have 3 shipments coming right now, and the tax on those 3 shipments on a normal basis for us would be somewhere around.
Well, we could use this one as an example.
Yeah. He has a real example. Okay.
Customs broker clearance and receipt and taxes, back in the day. And basically we had a shipment, the value, John, was $68,000.
Yeah.
And we got taxed 7.5%. So we paid about $5,000 and some change on that shipment.
On the taxes.
That was just the taxes, not including other fees for shipping, delivery, customs clearance, and some other fees. That was just the duty and duty fees.
Yeah.
It's about $5,500
on a shipment. What was the value again?
70,000.
On 70,000, approximately. So he's giving you what we actually paid in real taxes on that. Well, if let's say our next 3 shipments were 70,000 per shipment, it would be 210,000. And if we incurred 150% tax rate on that, the tax I would owe on the 210,000 would literally be 2.5 times 210,000. So if I did some quick math on that, right, we would basically owe $500,000 in cash. Now, the problem with that is that we might not have that kind of cash, right? And this is also a reason, like you mentioned, is that we need to raise the price a little early on to even intake that shipment.
Yep.
So I think there's a lot of complicated situations from a supplier side that is not talked about. People are afraid to talk about it. But that's kind of what's going on. And for Mark and I's case, we're a small business, and just for 3 shipments, that's quite a lot of cheddar. and
that's
we
make or break a business kind of money for a lot of people with small margins.
Yeah, and that's definitely a conversation. If we're really getting real, that's definitely a conversation that that's been in the mix. Like, is this going to break us if we have to do it 3 more times? Yep. And so so just being completely real and completely honest, and maybe 3 months from now, if you're watching this, things would have changed. Like you mentioned, I have no idea, but it's definitely like a conversation we've definitely had. So it's a bit of a different game, and at the scale, like, it really smacks you. Where Mark mentioned, $5,000. If you multiply that by three shipments, it's $15,000. Now you're talking about 150% tariff, and it turns into $500,000. I mean, that's a shock to anybody, right? For your cash flow. So it's a massive hit.
The other side of the tug of war, Corey, is like, when you do decide to increase the prices on the inventory you get, and then let's say tariffs go away or come down, what's the consumer going to think? They're going to think maybe you should be decreasing the prices immediately, because the tariffs went down. But they don't always know. Well, all this inventory, I had to pay the higher tariff.
Right.
It could be a matter of maybe your competition imported something the next day and didn't pay a tariff, and now it's like, well, now you're just sitting duck that you paid more and your competitor didn't. So it's a very tough situation of how do you increase it? When do you increase it? When do you go back and increase it and lower it? So it's very, very tough.
And one thing I did want to mention too is we are primarily talking about China here. There are tariffs on a lot of different countries. A lot of those have been rolled back for 90 days, starting sometime last week. But we're particularly talking about China here because that is where a lot of craft supplies come from. And I do see people talking about manufacturing in the US, and we will talk about that. So don't think we're ignoring your questions. We have like a whole section to talk about that. But we are primarily talking about China because that is where a lot of craft supplies come from. If you're thinking about basically any crafting machine, it's manufactured in China. So we're talking all the lasers, printers, Cricut machines. I mean, there's some in Malaysia, there's some other places, but primarily we're talking about China for the crafting industry. Even Glowforge, which manufactures in the US, still buys components from China. They still buy raw materials from other places. And we'll talk a little bit more about this too. It's not like we can just go source them elsewhere really quickly. And again, we'll talk about that. But because we're talking about these huge tariffs, because those are the Chinese tariffs right now, and that is affecting the craft industry, I think, the most. So if somebody's ordering craft supplies from the Philippines, it might not be so much. But right now, China is kind of our big, the thing we're talking about the most.
Yeah, so let me bring that question back to, I think, let me bring it back. We kind of went into the supplier side of things, which I think, a lot of folks watching might be like, well, how does it affect us, right? So the reason we went so deep in the behind the scenes is to really get an understanding of what's going on, because it affects you. Because as our costs increase, obviously we won't be here if we can't put those costs and increase the price of our products. So essentially, the tug of war, it's creating a lot of uncertainty for us. And a lot of back and forth where we don't understand where the prices are exactly going to be. But we're doing the best we can to keep, the prices down. But yes, like eventually, meaning in possibly 2, 3, 4 weeks, as more inventory comes in at the higher prices, we're going to have to slowly move prices up. Now, it might not be a crazy price increase, but I think on the supply side, everyone understands that, like, we're not going to want to move the price 100 or 150, like we're not going to move it up at 75%, but everyone is just slowly trying to get there, that way that like everybody can slowly do that. Because otherwise there's going to be a massive shock. And so we're doing what we can to keep the prices down. And at MakerFlo, we've only increased the price just a little bit on decanters because that's the newest shipment we've had, but the rest of our website has been the same price like it's always been. But that doesn't mean that that's not going to change once more shipments start coming in. And start mixing into sort of our current inventory. Now, the other problem, again, I don't want to take so long on this slide, but the other problem we're having is obviously, I'm not the news, but the news is what it is, right? And a lot of folks are calling and buying a lot of our current pre-tax inventory. And I'm just like, again, being upfront, that is happening. So people that, never purchased big lots before are coming in and buying a lot of this pre-tax. So people are trying to basically stock up. And I've gotten to the point where, like, if I know a customer and a client that's big enough to be fair to everybody else, I have a conversation and be like, hey, how much are you really trying to stock up? Because like, if you take up all my inventory, like everyone else is just, they're going to be left hanging. Like, please don't take the whole inventory. Right. And for me, it's great. Like, okay, take it all. Right. It makes it easy. But we have been through this through COVID, and we have feelings, and we do get messages where people are like, how are you out of inventory? Like, we rely on some of these products and you've been out of inventory for so long. So, and we're feeling that with our 20-ounce skinnies right now. We've been out for like 6 months and we get messages constantly. Right. So we feel that. And so we're trying to mitigate that as much as possible as well.
Yeah, I think that's all really important. Okay, let's talk about our second question here. This is a question that I have in here because it's something that you talked about on an affiliate call that we were on yesterday. Yeah, was that 2 days ago? I don't know. Really recently. And I had never even heard of it. And I was just like, wait, this is happening too? I did not even realize. So talk about the de minimis policy and how it is being revoked and how that now also applies on top of tariffs to these foreign made goods.
Yeah, you want to take that, Mark?
Yeah, I'll start. So the de minimis rule, I mean, it was first created to really simplify how customs was processing low value imports. And basically to help regulate these very small value shipments, they didn't want to spend, customs didn't want to necessarily spend the time or resources to have to go through every small shipment and assign a tax, pay the duty, all the billing back and forth. So they're reducing the workload with the de minimis rule. So the de minimis rule means any shipment under $800 value did not incur any duty or any additional fees. So this really opened up the door for companies like Temu and Shein to come in and be able to sell directly to the U.S. market and ship small packages, small value, right into the consumers here in the U.S. So there's good and bad to that, right? Like that's awesome that us as consumers, we have access to affordable products, and we've been used to that for so long now. Now there's caveats that come with that of like, okay, it's a hit or miss, right? When you order from Temu on the quality or how it's going to show up, if it's damaged, what kind of support are you going to be getting from that as well? But hey, sometimes it's worth it for the good price that you get, and you just take that gamble and that risk on that product. But it's also affected American businesses such as Forever 21. Shein has basically put Forever 21 into bankruptcy. I would say Temu probably caused Party City into bankruptcy. You can get party supplies. Usually if you're planning a party, you're planning in advance, where you can wait that 1, 2, 3 weeks of transit time for those supplies. So it's affected our economy in that way as well. So there's good and bad to it.
Yeah. I think Mark covered that pretty well. But I would just
quick question here.
Yeah.
So one of the things that I was like in the middle of looking at doing was having keychains manufactured for my side hustle, which is called Chapter and Craft. It's a book-based Etsy shop. I have a, wholesaling and that sort of thing as well. And I was looking at getting 2 types of keychains made. And my shipment would have been under $800. That means I would not have paid duty on that when it came through.
Correct. Okay. So yeah, and what that was doing was it came to a point where I remember Mark and I used to have conversations, and we were totally about this. It was almost like you could go and buy wholesale without paying the tax, whereas Mark and I had no choice but to pay the tax. So it was almost worth it. When we came to a point where people used to ask, and we were like, you know what, it's worth it to go direct if you find the right supplier. Like you will literally pay less because you're foregoing paying the tax. But I think obviously they figured that out, and now they're blocking that where you can't order for less than 800 has been taken away, and the de minimis can be changed. So the 800, they can make it 600, they can make it 400. So any orders under 400 or 200, and that that can be changed a lot. But this could mean a lot of things. So like a little bit of warning if this is still implemented, like whenever it goes in, and if it stays, then we're very familiar with how China works. So they will circumvent the system some way. Right? They will tell you like, hey, you don't have to pay that. And if they do, it's exciting because for a lot of small businesses, they were going direct, and which is totally fine. It's no different than what Mark and I are doing, right? We're just doing it at a bigger scale, which allows us to bring, the costs down a little bit. So we were never opposed to it. Like if someone even asked me how to do it, I would tell you like, this is how you do it. Right. And it wasn't that. But now the problem is that I would like to warn everybody is if someone does say that, hey, the value of your invoice is $400, we can get it shipped to you and you don't have to really pay as many taxes. Question that. And the reason to question it is because what they usually do is they'll circumvent it through another country. And if the US government finds out, if the customs finds out that it's a made in China product, that it's coming from another country and it's not being, tagged as made in China, you can not only get fines for that, but they will actually seize the products. So be very careful if you're still going overseas, if you're getting offered the cheaper products, like question that and ask them, okay, what are you doing with this? And ask those questions. That way, you're not out of money or your product doesn't get held up. So it's important things to keep in mind.
Yeah, I think that that's really important for those of us running small businesses. So you have a small business and I have a small business. But I was really looking forward to actually working with a really great supplier in China. I'm not looking to buy junk. I'm looking to make custom products that, once again, we'll talk about. They literally cannot be made here with any manufacturer that I was able to find. And I spent a lot of time looking. And we'll talk about that more in a little bit. But it's like, even now, I automatically had to put this dream of these keychains. I know it sounds so small, but for me, I was so excited. I had this beautiful artwork done. They were going to be these little shaker keychains. So cute, really excited. Can't do it anymore. So the de minimis rule is something I just want everybody here to kind of keep in mind, that this is also not just going to affect these $68,000 shipments. It's also going to affect smaller things that are coming to you direct from China. So
correct.
And that's supposed to take effect on May 2nd. As far as today is concerned, May 2nd is the date that the de minimis is going away, and the fees on packages under $800 are, the proposed fees are 90% or $75 per package, right, John?
Yeah, and that is whichever one is higher gets imposed. So basically, if you buy a $20 dress and they put the invoice at $20, they're going to be like, okay, 90%, which is on $20 is going to be $18. So is it $18 or $75? So your $20 dress now becomes $75 plus 20, so it becomes $95. And that's from May 2nd to May 31st. And then on June 1st, it goes to 120%, or I've heard anywhere between $150 to $200. So again, be very careful, because another issue is China might be like, hey, like, you can get this dress for $40. But the way it works is China is not responsible to tell you the de minimis. They will just send it and you'll get the bill after. So be very careful. Or sometimes they do something called DDP, which they included, which you need to ask them, like, is the taxes included or not? So if you're still going direct, and if those lines and chains are still open, make sure if you're ordering direct that you're asking those questions. And if I'm wrong, that's fine. But I'd rather me be wrong and you ask the question and know exactly what you're paying for and make sure that you don't get seized, versus not knowing it all and finding that out later, because it's going to hurt more, Yeah.
So just giving people their, like, you need to look into this, is just have
correct.
the word
That's
for it.
Exactly. Just warning about that.
And I do want to say that de minimis is spelled, it's two words. I think it's probably Latin, DE, the first word, and then minimis, MINIMUS. De minimis, the minimum would be, something like that.
Correct.
All right. So we talked about de minimis. Now let's talk. I think we already covered this a little bit, but let's talk more about how those craft supplies are being impacted. So we talked a lot about, like, if you're a small business, but let's talk about, if you are a regular Joe crafter at home, and you just want to buy stuff at Michael's, or you want to buy, from MakerFlo or whatever, how is that going to affect those types of prices?
Yeah. This always, with this kind of question, when I was in this situation, I always felt like this was fear mongering, especially when it was during COVID, and a lot of that happened. And I just want everyone to know that, like, as we keep going on this presentation, that we're not trying to do that. But the way Mark and I like to do things is, like, worst case, best case, and kind of in the middle, right? And it's the viewer's job to consume that data and make a decision on where you feel things will be, and make a decision based on that. So when we talk about these things, we're not trying to scare anybody. We're just trying to talk as facts and as, from experience as we can. So obviously, if the tariffs are here to stay, if we start implementing a lot of inventory, what we see happening is if it stays for a longer period of time, we'll have to naturally increase the pricing to, make sure that we don't that those costs are forwarded. It will. And so our prices will increase over time. If they don't stay, which would be great, we're going to still incur taxes for a few shipments because they're already en route. So we're probably going to end up deciding to take that hit, unless that hit is insane. So if I end up paying, 150 or 200% tariff, and let's say the taxes go to zero tomorrow, we might raise the prices just on that inventory. And when it's gone, we'll reduce the price. So Mark and I have already discussed that, and we would definitely and 100% be doing that. But that's kind of like worst case, best case scenario on how that would work out. So it just all depends. But worst case, tariffs are here to stay. And if they are, then yeah, prices will naturally increase. So
I think one thing we need to note too is, again, I'm not trying to fear monger here. These are just things that would happen, is crafting tends to be, for most people, not a necessity, right? So as the price for everything goes up, because, you know, the price of things will go up with these sort of blanket tariffs. I think crafting might be one of the first things that falls off, right? I mean, there might be some people, maybe you lost a job or something recently and you want to have a side hustle. You know, those will get some people crafting that haven't crafted before doing that. But I do feel like when you have, you know, this extra spending and you just don't have the extra cash for it, I think crafting could be one of those things that goes. And so there's also the possibility that prices will increase because we just don't have as many customers, or, you know, something like that, where it's like there's just not as many people crafting because people don't have as much expendable income. So that's just something else I thought, you know, to mention, because I think during COVID we saw a huge boom in crafting, right? Because everybody was staying home. And I know that like 95% of businesses struggled in the US at the beginning of COVID, and it sucked. But as a crafter, who's someone who teaches people to craft, that was not terrible for me, because I was able to help people start their own little businesses, or, you know, de-stress or whatever it was. But I don't see that necessarily happening with this, because it's just not, it's not the same set of circumstances.
Yeah. I think another thing to understand about COVID, because, you know, we've had this conversation about this. We had this conversation a couple of days ago, was that we were getting bailouts consistently as well. So we were getting the checks from the government bailing us out, helping us out. And I think a lot of that went into starting the side hustles. However, I'm not sure what that's going to look like, you know, coming up. Like I don't know what that's going to look like. So if we remove the bailout money that was, you know, sent to us, that we used, you know, may have used to start a small business, with removing that, with prices increasing, yeah, I'm not going to lie. I mean, we definitely see that it might be a little tougher, you know, but that doesn't mean that you can't succeed in this space. I mean, we'll talk about that a little bit later, but yeah, as far as the question goes, is what will happen? Yeah, you'll see craft supplies, you know, going up. And another thing, and this is something that we all are very familiar with, is as we realize, and as it sinks in for more and more businesses, that craft supply prices are going to go up, I think a lot of established businesses are going to start hoarding. And what that does for, again, from a supply side, is that that inventory that came pre-tax will deplete faster. And when we get closer to when everyone gets closer to realizing, like, wow, the taxes aren't, you know, it's not going to lessen, I think that pre-tax inventory is really going to start going away, and the price increases will come sooner. And that's kind of what we're also seeing.
Well, let alone the price increases, let's talk about the actual supply availability.
Yep.
That there is going to be a gap. I mean, it's been a few weeks already of these tariffs in place, and from what we're hearing and seeing overseas at the China ports, is that the containers are stacking up sky high. They're not sending product over at these tariff rates. Product is just sitting there. And now we're also hearing that even if you have product that you want to send and pay the tariff, there's not even vessels that are making the trek across. There's not even enough containers to send the boats across. And we've also heard that some of the boats that were in transit, those orders got canceled midway, and they turned the boat around and they're going back to China. So there's going to be this gap, and unfortunately, it might be like a COVID scenario where there's no availability of products. Products are running out. You know, if your socks are made in China, and for, you know, the supply chain is breaking, and for multiple weeks or months none of that's coming over, well, there's not going to be any socks available. You know, and that's a huge concern that no one's realizing or talking about yet. But we're expecting that to really take shape here in the next few weeks, the next couple months, when the supply chain does break.
Or what's going to start happening is essentially it's not going to be a matter of no socks available, but as suppliers start realizing that, hey, supplies are going to be tough to come by, and to stop people from hoarding, meaning like people calling in and just buying up inventory, that also drives price up, right? So like for me to stop my guy to come by and just be like, hey, I want to buy all your decanters. Well, he's doing that because he wants a cheaper price. And it's hard to, the inventory is in, people can go on the website and buy it, right? And if let's say if you come and buy it, I can't just go be like, I'm going to refund, you know, so as that squeeze happens, you might see other suppliers raising prices to stop that from happening as well. So there's a lot of dynamics, right? And you don't think about everything, but how this again, I want to bring it back. How does this affect you? Depending on how long the tariffs stay, if it sinks into the industry that they're here to stay, like, we're just waiting for these prices. They are going to go up. And I think we'll start seeing real price hikes happen, like real aggressive ones happen in maybe a month and a half, when Mark is saying we see that inventory gap where we know there's shortages happening and people still have pre-tariff inventory. And when that that gap really starts to show and crack, I think prices are going to start going up higher than what they're even now.
Yeah. Okay, really quick. My husband is moderating comments, and I just want to ask him really quickly. Ryan, can you Google the de minimis rule and put a link like in my YouTube channel so that somebody asked like if we have the what was that?
I found the White House statement.
Okay, yeah. So he found the White House statement, so he's going to go ahead and link that in the chat. So
can you and then just make sure that on the de minimis, I know that it changed. So I have not looked at the White House link, but it was verbally changed, and this goes back to your first slide. There's a bit of confusion, so it might say I think the original was $25 or $50, and I think during press releases it was moved to like 75 and 150, but I don't know if the White House has come in. So that, going back to your first slide, things are moving so fast that we're unsure. So I think the cheapest that originally come up with was 25 to 50, and I think it was I can't remember the 75%, 30%, yeah, and then it kind of kept getting bumped up. So on the White House page, I'm not sure the link you sent if that it has that updated what was said, and what that and the way they're kind of doing that is like it's supposed to happen by May 2nd. So they might not put that out until they say that it's official. Okay. So I would say that everyone just research whenever you watch this and just see what the current is and what it's supposed to go to.
Okay, cool. Yeah, he said that doesn't have the updates, but that's kind of where it was announced, if anybody needs that link. Cool. All right, so this is kind of a big question, and I think we can talk about this for a long time. Why is it difficult or impossible to switch manufacturing entirely to the US? So this is definitely a question that people have. I personally think people think it's probably easier than it is. I know we can talk about this forever, so let's go.
I'll start. I was a little pre-context.
Can we have like 3 hours for this?
Yeah, it's a lot.
Okay. All right, go ahead, Mark.
Pre-context, like I mentioned, John and I have been business partners for 15 years. We've imported products from all over the world, many different countries. Our first business we started together, our manufacturer was actually in India. And we've been to India. I've been to India. John's from there. We have visibility and everything there. We've seen what goes on there. And we go to China all the time. So we used to go to China like twice a year. Yeah. And then after COVID, we've been going once a year, and we love exploring. We love learning the factories. We've been in the factories. We've actually made a tumbler from beginning to end, from welding it to cutting it and seeing the whole thing to painting it. So we have a lot of experience in this, and we've seen it all. So I just want to express that.
That's it?
That's it.
So you're going to get him? Oh, gosh. He's going to make me do the dirty work. Yeah, so we do come with a lot of experience. I think there's a lot of suppliers out there that have never been. And I think there's a lot of folks that have never stepped into that factory before, right? And there's a lot of folks that don't understand what goes into that. So let's talk about it a little bit. So the first and foremost, there's two ways to look at this. There's one way is finding a supplier in the US to get like a manufacturer in the US to do it for you, right? And that's the best case scenario. So for example, like cutting boards, I'm definitely not a carpenter. I'm not a woodworker. Like I've never worked with it, but there are places in America where you can get cutting boards. And, Mark and I are exploring that. Like, hey, let's bring some of that back and let's source from America. It's totally like in our sights, right? Not a problem at all. Well, the second part about all this is that is there industry here for it or not, right? And if there isn't, in case of the tumblers, there is no tumbler manufacturer. I think the last one that was here was in 2004 and they closed it down. So now if there's no manufacture currently here, the only option left is what your question is. Why don't Mark and I bring manufacturing back to the US? And I think it's a very fair question, right? So the first thing I would like to say is that Mark and I went to school. I went for finance, and Mark also went for finance. And we're both finance guys, right? Neither of us has zero experience on how to do manufacturing. We just don't know, right? And in order to walk into that is very overwhelming, right? So that's one thing. The second thing is the financial obligation to start manufacturing here. So funnily enough, you bring this question up because it was about during COVID that we considered it. And so we've actually looked into it, is let's start making tumblers here, right? And the funnier, not the funnier, but the crazier part about this is we were actually under contract on a piece of land that we were going to try. So we actually went, we got over our fear, and we were like, okay, let's at least lay the groundwork for it, right? What we ran into was we got the land, we were in contract, and we started getting into construction, meaning that we started talking about it, laying out a plan, like, okay, this is what it's going to look like, this is what it's going to be. Now, building the walls was okay. Like, we could build a building, we could do everything. The minute we got into the planning stage of where are we going to get the machines, the raw material, and building what we needed for it, the financial obligation of that was so high that there's no way that we can get funded for it. So the approximate cost to start the manufacturing for tumblers it ended up being around $45 to $50 million. So one thing is, I don't have that kind of cheddar. Mark and I collectively can't.
And we don't have the other customers that would want to buy the blanks. We don't have that established business other than our own customers, buying our own supply. But we don't have those wholesale customers ready to go.
Correct. And the other side of this was, let's say if we did come up with a number and Mark and I were like, okay, it's going to take $50 million to get started. There's no one that's going to lend us the money for it because, like what Mark said, we don't have the customers for it. Right. So now somebody might be thinking, well, you could convince somebody to buy enough for you to get the lending. Right. And you might be like, you could figure it out. I'm like, yeah, I'm sure I could figure it out. But you have to find the person that's willing to take that risk and willing to give that time, because the timeline for something like this to even get going is about 3 to 4 years. So we not only have to put that kind of money into it, but we have to keep that money in without making a dime until it's functional, right? Now, that number that I gave you was only to get the building up, the machinery in, to get all the certifications, to get everything going. We're not even talking about the operational cost, right? The raw material cost, the training cost, and everything that goes into it. And so the ongoing cost of it, to set it up here, I think it's easy to say, like, hey, let's bring it back. But the risk, now we're doing all of this, hoping that it works. And I think for a lot of businesses like us, that's just too big of a risk to take, right?
And I think there's some other things too that I'm just going to throw out there. All of the parts you need to build that factory are coming from overseas. So they're going to be hit by a 25% to 150% tariff. Like, we don't have all the raw materials you need. We don't have all of the tooling machines you need to make the parts to build the thing, right?
I haven't even gotten there yet, because that's the logistical nightmare. Because yes, you're 100% right. So the factory that makes the tumbler doesn't make the lid. The factory that makes the lid and the tumbler doesn't make the boxes. The factory that makes the lid, tumbler, and boxes doesn't make the straw. So where do you get the industry to make all that? And that doesn't exist in the US. So now you're in this hole that, okay, well, if I have to do a tumbler thing, then, well, I got to now open a lid factory, and I got to open this and I got to open that. And by the time we're done, we're $100 million in.
At least. I mean, I feel like, and you know, if like a lot of our wood comes from Canada, right? So we're getting tariffed on wood coming in. That's just building the building, and you have a tariff on that. Like, it's just the things to source the things in the US, the infrastructure and the raw materials are just not here. And you need machines to build parts, and you need machines to build the machines parts. Like, it's really the supply chain for building manufacturing is so global that being able to like just say, okay, we're going to make it in the US is very, very difficult. There's this great video that I just watched from, it was probably from the 70s. Milton Friedman, maybe, talking about how you make a pencil and how many thousand people it takes to make one pencil and how they are spread around the world, and how none of them are really, you know, the steel company that makes that little piece at the end, and the graphite company and the wood company and the paint company and the, like, there's all these pieces. And I think when we just kind of say like, hey, we should bring it back to the US, we have to consider these huge implications. And so, like, I went to try and find a manufacturer to make these keychains I want to make. Specifically, they are acrylic keychains. They are printed with, I'm assuming, something like UV DTF or direct to, you know, they're being printed directly on the acrylic.
Yeah.
They have like little shaker pieces in them. They have the metal keychain part. They're very cute. I'm very excited about them. So it feels like I can get those for China for about $4.19 each, which means that, you know, decent markup, I can sell them and make a okay profit on them. They're all my design. But for me to say, okay, well, now I'm going to start manufacturing in the US, it's going to cost me $200,000 in machinery. Where am I going to put that machinery? In my house? Like, this is my house. I don't have any desire to be a manufacturer. Like, this is just not my passion. Not to mention that, like, I don't know, the logistics of it are just like mind-blowing to me. And then one other thing is, I've seen this go around several times, and this is for everybody on the political spectrum. The differences for each side were not that much. 80% of people want to bring manufacturing back to the United States. 15% of people say they work in factories.
And that's it. And I would, that's exactly it, is where do you find who wants to do it, right? Like, are you not to sound any which way, but like, are we promoting our next generation to go into manufacturing? I don't think so. I think we're telling them, hey, go AI, you know, go this, go that, but we don't have the labor to take on that much manufacturing if it's brought by. And that's something, like, we already have problems with hiring, and, you know, we have to really manage efficiency of team members that are here, and manufacturing is a process that needs more of that. It needs so much efficiency. You have to really be on point on everything. Yeah. One wrong move in the States and you hurt yourself, and litigation, you know, or if someone's not efficient, then how do you get a good unit price for it to be economical? So I think there's a lot of things that need to be looked at. And I think the way we've kind of come about all this, especially in the States, is that, yeah, we haven't created a space where we have promoted this, which brings me back to, if we haven't created this in labor, we also have not created this in manufacturing, meaning that it's not conducive. All the risk falls on Mark and I to start manufacturing. There's no support, right? I have to take the loan. If I lose, I have to go bankrupt. So there's no incentive for me to start manufacturing. There's no, I'm hoping, again, that everything comes into play and that I'm able to make a profit, right? And I think if manufacturing does need to come by, now I want to say, I'm not opposed to starting a factory here. However, mitigate my risk, right? Subsidize something.
Your exposure.
Right. Because if I'm taking all the risk, and the risk is $100 million, and let's say by the grace of God, we figure out where to come up with that, how am I going to make it back, right? And if I'm 100% at risk and there's no subsidies for it or anything, you're not going to have a lot of manufacturing coming back. Who's going to take that risk, right? And I think that's something that's not being talked about. And I think, again, being very candid, I mean, we've thought about it. We, like I said, we were in contract for 12 acres of land that we were actually wanting to do this. And we had to back out because, man, once we ran the numbers and the 100% risk part, we're like, man, we're not getting subsidized. I mean, it's so tough, right? So.
And one of the other things that I just thought about, I'm sorry, my brain is just.
Yeah, away. I know.
one of the things I really like about your company, and if you guys don't know this about MakerFlo, is they make a lot of products you can't get anywhere else. They go, instead of like just buying from a giant catalog of things you can get, they're like, no, we want to specifically make a tumbler that has a removable handle so that you can sublimate it more easily, right? So they have like patents and things that you just can't find anywhere else. So if you were going to build a manufacturing plant here in the United States, either you would lose your competitive advantage because you'd have to sell those tumblers wholesale to other people, or you would have to make a whole bunch of other plain tumblers to send to the people who just want to buy from a catalog. So there's just so many facets to think about.
Yeah. And I love that you picked the tumbler. It's something that is something that we like to do. Like if I could bring that manufacturing back and make our tumblers that, they're patent pending, just the machinery to make the tumblers are specialized machines. And you kind of talked about that. And unfortunately, those specialized machines are, well, guess where they're made. So, either way, the exposure stays that way. And it becomes, yeah, it's tough. But again, like I'm not opposed to like starting a manufacturing thing in the US, a center here, but just the legwork and the risk and the time, and there's just a lot involved in that, and it makes it, it makes it extremely hard. And I'm not sure that reward is there at the end of the day, or I don't know if I have that much time to reap the reward for it, sort of thing,
Yeah. I think this is all really important to talk about. And I mean, obviously people are going to have different opinions, but it's like, do you want to take the risk? That's the main thing. And I think with the way things are now, with very few, if any, subsidies for small businesses, especially for maybe the government will say, sure, you can build a car company here. You can build things that are big, but crafters are never high on anybody's list, right? It's not like somebody's like, you know what we need to do? We need to make tumblers in the US. That is not high on the government's list of manufacturing to bring back to the US.
I think a good person to really, if we get an interview, it would be Hetty, because they're a $3 billion company and they're traded on the stock exchange. And they probably have enough cash flow to spend $50 million to start a manufacturing plant in the US. And I know that something that they've done is they've gone to, I think, was it Thailand or Malaysia, to start sourcing some of their tumblers from there to mitigate the taxes. They could have easily just spent the cash flow and the capital to build here. I'm not even close to, our company's not even worth $50 million. I don't know where I'm supposed to come up with that kind of money to build, but they certainly can. And they're probably being pushed to the tier where hopefully they build something. And listen, if Yeti builds a manufacturing plant here and they're willing to open it up to suppliers like myself to buy from them, I'm all for it.
Yeah.
But we just don't have the capital and the ability to put that much risk out there to do it ourselves. Like, and no one's going to lend the money to us. Like who's going to lend $100 million to somebody who's never proven that we can make that much money, right?
I don't think any of us are opposed to bringing manufacturing back here.
Correct.
I think we're all, I would love to walk down the street and go to my keychain supplier instead of having to deal with, somebody in China. And then one other thing I wanted to talk about too sorry, my brain is all over the place, is I think a lot of times we associate Chinese goods with poor quality. And that's just not true anymore. It is true in some cases, Temu, Shein, like these, we get a lot of poor quality things, but I work with companies like Xtool who are producing high quality machines, and they're innovating faster than anybody else in the laser space, for example. And so I just received yesterday their new DTF printer, which I'm stoked about. I'm so excited about this for small businesses, t-shirt shops. Awesome. It answers a lot of the safety concerns I had. So excited for this. This is like a $4,000 printer. With the taxes, this is going to be a $10,000 printer. And that just prices so many people out of being able to start small businesses. And I just don't, the infrastructure just isn't here to build that DTF printer here yet. So I don't want to necessarily, when we think about China, just think about cheap goods. Obviously, you guys are making incredibly high quality blanks. Your stuff is so beautiful, what to work with compared to something I buy cheap on Amazon. And yes, we pay a little bit more for it because of the quality. And so I think we need to kind of separate China from cheap. Yes, China produces a lot of cheap crap, but they also produce a lot of things that are not crap. And I think that's important.
Yeah, this is a touchy subject. I don't mind talking about it. When we take,
I mean, they're so efficient, from the skilled labor to the inspection, multiple inspections along the way of that product being produced. Now, if that had to be done in the U.S., okay, now what extra labor cost are we incurring just for the inspection? This manufacturing and efficiency it's a skill. It's a skill that they have, and it's really like in their blood from many generations. You know, that's what they know, that's what they do, and yeah, you find the right factory, they can do it dang well. We have a quick story where we were looking at a glass factory to get glass from in the U.S. and it was an in-person meeting, and we actually compared the glass side by side, and the factory in the U.S. admitted that the Chinese glass was better than theirs. It had better clarity, it had a better crisp edge to the lip, and he was like, yeah, this one is better. It's made with a better material, and he could not make that same quality of glass. And funny enough, his glass that was of lesser quality was still more expensive. And it will still be more expensive even with the current tariff, right?
Right. With the current tariff,
It's a little more competitive.
The glass is going to still be double the price. And by the way, what I was showing on screen was that supplier's glass sample
from the U.S. Yeah.
From the U.S. So he said that we could get better glass made in the U.S., but the materials are imported, and that's the way that they get around it. And so
his price is going up as well.
So his price is also going up. And the other thing he told me is that because they're in manufacturing, they're unionized, and they're going to be union price increases coming like sometime this year. So it has its own battles. And I mean, I don't know, Corey, I don't know how long you want this to go. If you're okay to going over time, but I have another story too. See, I really wanted to come at this with facts. I don't want to. They're going to be hypotheticals, but I don't want to answer questions just out of hypotheticals either. One of the products that we made actually in the U.S. was, I don't know if you remember this, Mark, but we were making the laser engravable frames. Yeah. Remember that? We had the whiteboard. We were making wood frames. And we got in touch with somebody here to manufacture those for us. So basically what they were, they had a brown lumber frame, and the inside was white, and you could laser engrave it, and it turns out like it engraves out brown. And you could, if you go to Etsy, you'll see those. And so one of the first conversations we had, we knew the material was going to be whatever it was, right? But the manufacturing portion of it, the price of the frames were changing based on if we wanted it to be QA'd or not. He's like, hey, if you don't want me to QA it, like I can make it cheaper because I don't have to hire somebody. And I'm like, how much cheaper? And per unit, it was a lot. I'm like, okay, well, we'll QA it ourselves. You know, like you don't have to do it. And that's not really conducive to our business. We're not QA, but I mean, we're not a massive company. So we're like, all right, just to get it made in America, we'll do it. We'll QA it ourselves. And so we forewent that. Then he was like, okay, well, if you allow me to go a month, you know, we can do it slower and use less people. I don't have to hire any more people, and I can make it cheaper. And the amount of roadblocks we had to go to get this order was massive. Well, fine. We went through it all. We ordered. We actually did. And we introduced it. Put made in America, put it online. And believe it or not, to this day, we have a little bit of inventory left. And that was about 4 years ago. So what that story is about is, even though we do it, the market was not willing to spend for the additional price.
Yeah, I think people say they will, and some people might. I'm not saying that people will not, but it's a smaller percentage of the population that even has the budget to, because so many people are, you know, running on empty. And so, you know, whether or not, that's why the popularity of places like Temu and Shine and all these places are so popular, is because, I could get party supplies for $1 versus going to Party City and paying a little bit more or whatever it is. You know, a lot of people are going to take the cheapest route. And that's why places like those places exist. That's why Amazon exists. It's, you know, it's just the way it is. And I don't know if we can retrain people who don't have a lot of extra spending money to buy more expensive things.
Yeah. And Corey, for that reason, that little bit of inventory I have left now, well, we're actually for we are for tariffs. It does level the playing field. I don't disagree with that. So now this made in America inventory, now it becomes a little bit more competitive, and I'm okay with that. But now the problem we run into is the quality.
Yep.
It's not there. So there are issues with it. Not that nothing is solvable, but just the current nature of everything, which could be 6 months to a year. These are sort of the issues that I just want to come out and let everyone know these are kind of the issues we're dealing with. Not that they're not resolvable and not that we can't manufacture, but there's a lot of things that, will have to be supported in America to build the industry back up and bring everything back. Again, not saying it's impossible, not saying that we don't want to do it, but that support will have to be given for it to be successful the way we really want it to, which is bring everything back.
Yeah, I think just being, I was just thinking.
But it always comes back to that, right? You're talking about one or two things and a smaller scale, but in order to make that smaller scale affordable, the bigger scale needs to be there. Yeah.
Like airplanes, we do a good job of making airplanes. We have the capabilities and efficiencies of that.
So, sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think more than anything, we just want people to be aware of the roadblocks, right?
Exactly.
And not think that companies are like, well, we're just going to raise our prices because, we don't want to come back to America, or, it's not a flippant decision to not buy made in America or to source from American parts. Like, I literally cannot source these keychains from America. I have looked. I spent several hours looking. They just don't exist. And so for me to do that, it would be manufacturing. And for me, that's not the life I want to live right now. So, maybe that's if somebody else wants to spend several $1 million to build me a keychain factory, yeah, I'll order from you. So if you're out there and you're like, yes, I've got, a couple mil to spend and you want to build a keychain factory, I will buy from you and I'll slap an American made sticker on there. But then again, all of your acrylic, everything has to be sourced here for it to make sense.
You need everything else.
Because
actually, a great part about that is even we actually found a North American manufacturer for cutting boards, and a big thing. So again, just real facts and real examples. We got to a price that was acceptable. It was double the price of what our current cutting boards. No, 2.5 times what the current cutting boards that we sell are. It was going to be at that price wholesale, and we were like, okay, we're going to go with that. The next step was like what you're saying. We were like, okay, how are you going to package it? And we're like, oh, he's like, well, I was just going to saran wrap everything and you guys just sell them in like bundles. I'm like, I'm pretty sure my end user is not going to want like a saran wrapped like cutting board coming their way. How are they going to resell it? And so he's like, okay, well, why don't you guys box it? They were telling us that. I'm like, okay, well, okay, we'll do that to keep it here. Well, we go to the box guy and we're like, okay, we need 1,000 boxes. Well, the boxes alone for what we needed was going to cost like $2-3 additional per unit. And we're like, whoa, that really increased the cost. And I'm like, okay, how do we get it to scale so like the cost goes down to like 50 cents to $1? And they were like, well, you got to at least order like 10,000 of them. And I'm like, I don't know what I'm going to do with 10,000 boxes. And so because we don't have the industry here, everything is at such a large scale, we can't, there's that gap. And so like you're saying, we don't have the supporting industry, it does become hard. And MakerFlo we cannot sell a cutting board without a box. Like it's going to cause so much damage in transit. We're going to have so many returns. It just causes more problems, right? There's so many other logistical things we have to think about. So yeah, again, I'm not saying anything is impossible, but to make things possible today is extremely costly. And the risk we would have to take would be massive. So not opposed to it, but yeah.
I feel like that was a good section on that. And hopefully people understand that it's not a simple proposition. It's very expensive.
Yeah.
And there has to be desire for people to, want to build those sorts of factories and things. All right. My next question, moving on. So what can hobbyists and small business owners, what can we do to sort of adjust to the rising costs? Because, as much as I don't want to, the cost I get to make stickers went up, basically slashing my profit margin. I mean, I realize I don't make a lot on stickers, but I sell a lot of stickers. And so I have to raise my prices. There's just, other than raising prices or, what are some other ways to kind of get around this?
Well, first, I would say, if you're a small business or an entrepreneur, have a side hustle, etc., be careful on the prices that you're giving and don't promise, a quote to somebody for too long of a time frame. I would definitely cut those time frames down to, hey, this is a quote, and this quote's good for maybe a couple of days or a week. Don't commit to prices for the foreseeable future, because things are changing so rapidly. The other thing I would say is if you can afford it, to get your supplies now and load up a little bit on what you can afford to kind of keep your costs down, if at all possible. Those are a couple of suggestions I have. And then as far as really branding yourself and creating that value in your business, you got to double down on that. You really got to focus on building your brand. Don't be a faceless company that people don't know who they're working with. People want to do business with people they know, like, and trust, And so get your face out there. Put your story, your picture, a video on your socials, on your website. Get visibility on TikTok. There's a new app called Whatnot that I've been on that seems to be really cool. Opportunity to sell personalized products and different unique items. That's coming up. And just double down on that and know your why. Why are you doing this? And why would a customer connect with your story? And put that story out there, and what makes you different, and that's what I would double down on.
Yeah, I'm very big on that. I would double back on that. I think the business environment is really changing. Mark and I were at a conference not too long ago. It's called Shop Talk. It's a big conference for what's to come. And some of the speakers that were there from bigger companies, from like PacSun, we heard from them, Levi's Jeans, basically multi-billion-dollar companies. And one thing that we got out of it is even they're unsure as far as marketing goes where they're going. But the big talk was micro-influencers. And what that basically told us was that, what the bigger companies are even looking for is that connection, that human-to-human connection. Gone are the days where they're looking for that 10 million count. They're actually looking for micro-influencers to connect at that micro level, where they know that the influencers have that group of people that they're connecting with, and they want those connections. So that just goes to tell me that if you are a small business, make sure your story is known, make sure your customers know who you are and they're buying for you and not for the product. Because the minute you start, my thing is always, the minute you start marketing your entire business on price, then you get customers that are going to be shoppers. They're going to price, and they're going to price you out, right? But if it's your story, it's very unlikely that, if they come for you and shop for you and want to support you, there's probably not, you're only in trouble if you have a twin. So that's the only way you can get in trouble. So if you don't have a twin that you don't like, you're pretty much safe, because there's only one of you. And do what you're comfortable with. And I think some of the things that Mark spoke about was great. And make sure that, Mark and I went through this and made a huge mistake during COVID, which was, buying too much inventory. It put us in a very uncomfortable space. We gambled that, hey, we don't know how long, because nobody told us there was going to be a time limit on COVID. And the way things were going, we had no idea. So we were like, okay, we're going to probably be shut down for 2-3 years. And the way we were buying inventory was to make sure we were supplied. Well, we overshot by a lot and got stuck with inventory, and it caused problems. So with that experience, we now know our cutoff. Know your cutoff. Don't sit today and be like, I'm going to buy inventory through Christmas because the prices are right. The economy will adjust, prices will go up, and don't put yourself out of money for something that may or may not happen, 6, 7, 8 months from now. Now there are industries that rely on that, but ours really doesn't. If I were in the situation, I would probably make sure I have enough inventory to at least last through Father's Day, because that is, as a small crafter and a small business owner, that is sort of the one big event is Mother's and Father's Day, besides sort of Christmas. So, but yeah, that's what I would say. And if you're just a hobbyist, I would just recommend whatever is the craft that you're in. So whether it's knitting, whatever it is, if there's that one craft that you get a lot of joy in, just make sure you have the opportunity to buy it for cheaper today. Just buy a little bit more, but don't buy too much. And that way, you have a little bit of inventory of that, but don't stock everything up. You just don't know. Tomorrow, just like the way the tariffs were raised so fast, it's very possible tomorrow we might not have them at all, right? And you don't want to get stuck with all this stuff. And I guarantee you go back to a Michael's or whatever, I'm sure people are going to start implementing policies saying that there's not going to be returns anymore. So don't get stuck with it. So
that's a good point. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. That was really good. I feel like We talked about this on our podcast. So if you don't know, me and Angie Holden, we run a podcast called Crafting for Profit. And we had John on the podcast late last year. And one of the things we talked about was trends and not overbuying for trends, because a lot of times we're like, okay, this thing is really trendy right now, I'm going to buy a ton of it. And then that trend ends and you're still stuck with a lot of inventory. So that's another thing to think about, is when you're buying, like, do we think this is going to last? Or maybe it won't, and then you're going to be stuck with a bunch of stuff, and we obviously don't want you to have that. All right. So we kind of talked a little bit about this, but is there anything else you want to talk about when it comes to both of our personal experiences, yours, mine, Mark's, anything that you think would be helpful for people?
As far as?
Of just like your experience, like, I think we've talked about it a lot. So I was just, if there's anything else where you're like, yeah, this is another thing we're dealing with that I haven't covered yet, let me know.
Oh, from our end, I think we've talked about a lot about, bringing back manufacturing, about what the kind of future looks like. I think we haven't really talked much about what I think creative things you can do as a business to make sure that you're sort of ahead of it going forward. I think a lot of people are wondering, like, what do we do for marketing? How do we market ourselves? Or you might be losing some foot traffic on Etsy, but now things get even worse as prices are raising. So we can maybe get into a little bit of that if you'd be interested.
Sure. Yeah, I got time.
Okay. So I think a big one that Mark has been addicted to, that I keep looking over in the last 5 days, and I'm like, Mark, what are you doing? And he's been on this app called Whatnot. It's this like new rage. And if you haven't checked it out, check it out. I still don't know how it applies to us, but Mark and I like to stay ahead of trends. But I'll let Mark explain to you what that is, because he's been on it constantly.
Literally gonna go find it now while you explain it, so I don't forget.
And sometimes when he doesn't have his phone on silent, I catch him because it's like, oh, I'm like, what are you doing? But I'll let him explain.
I've been on there way too much. I've spent way too much money on there. It's super exciting. I've gotten no sleep. I was up all night Saturday. I was like 2 a.m. on Whatnot, connecting with whatever I'm interested in, right? So for me, I'm a shoe fanatic. I love shoes. I like Nikes. I like Jordans. There's different channels and people on Whatnot, from handbags to clothing to arts and crafts to apparel, all kinds of stuff. Basically, it's like an eBay and TikTok on steroids. It's live selling, but there's different ways of doing the live selling. So one way of doing it is like a buy now price, where somebody is live and they have their inventory around them. They have their store button on there, and you can click into their store and see what they have. And you can be like, oh, hey, Corey, let me see those Nike shoes in a size 12.
Or a keychain.
Or a keychain. And you'll go and grab it and you'll show it off to them and explain it to them. And you'll be like, okay, here's my price. It's $15. And I might be like, can you do $12? And I might negotiate with you live on the stream.
This sounds so stressful to me.
Yeah.
It sounds awesome. Like the most stressful thing I've ever heard.
For both sides, because I see him bidding, like working. He's like, oh my god, I gotta swipe. Anyway.
So you might come back and be like, all right, let's meet in the middle. Let's do like 13.5. And you send me the offer. I swipe. My credit card's on file. My shipping address is on file. I accept the bid. It's bought. It's gone. You put it to the side. You move on to the next customer or the next offer. The other ways of selling is you can do live auctions starting at whatever price you want to do. So a lot of people do $1 starts, live bidding, and you have either like 3 to 30 seconds to bid. And some of these people go super fast. They're like, okay, here's the item. It's a tumbler, 20 ounce, printed with this, go. And then this goes down, and then the bidding just goes up and up depending on what you want to bid. And then they go on.
Sounds amazing. And also the most stressful thing I've ever heard. Sounds insane.
So what I saw last night was a gentleman that was doing custom embroidered hats. And what he was doing was he was like, okay, here's the auction. It's for a black and gray hat. Let's imagine this with no printing on it. He goes, this is what you're bidding on. When you win, you decide what design you want, what color threading you want, if you want to add the little tassel and stuff on there. And he had pinned at the top like 6 different design options. So he was just showed the hat and the bidding.
Like a virtual hat bar.
Yes, yeah. A virtual hat bar. And so he was selling the hats anywhere from $20 to $40, depending on the color or whatever the bid went to.
Okay, yeah.
When it sells for cheap, they're like, man, you got a steal. You robbed me. They get all intense about it.
Yeah.
But he was selling hats every minute. He was selling a hat like every minute. He was starting to bid. And then he had a guy behind him doing the embroidery, and they were like doing them on the spot, print on demand, and it was absolute genius. I seen a guy doing laser engraving, or he was doing the same type
Thinking
of thing.
about for my upcoming craft fairs, because now I have this DTF printer. I was thinking about doing like, printing out a bunch of different transfers and doing a t-shirt transfer bar at a craft fair. And yeah, so I see Angie there going, unique selling apps. Yes, Angie, we need to like get on this because I feel like that's really cool.
And we're not affiliates of any of this. This is just something that like Mark and I are always looking for we're always looking for new things. The last thing you want to do is get in a room with us about talking what's next and what's new. As you can see, we're already at an hour and 15 minutes. So this is like a very short version of what happens probably on a daily with us. So, but we're always trying to look for something new, especially for the industry. This is something that we think is really interesting, and I think it could really have a lot of legs to it. So I think that's a really great opportunity. So, check it out, see if it works for you. And again, we're not affiliated with it. We just think it's a really cool idea. And clearly Mark's been a great customer for them as a buyer of other items on there. I love watching it.
Shoes have you bought, Mark?
Oh God, be honest.
I think around 10 pairs so far.
And he's only been on the app for like 10 days.
I mean, they're good deals, they're good deals.
Yeah.
How many feet do you have?
Hey,
well,
365 days in a year, so
Yeah. And how many steps do you take, right?
Right side.
Yeah. And you haven't even asked him how many shoes he has.
Already.
So yeah.
I'm a little terrified of that answer, but I'm over here with like 7 laser machines and 7 printers and a DTS. So I mean, I've got my own hoarding problem. I understand.
It's great backup to TikTok. If TikTok goes down, I think Whatnot will spike like crazy.
Yeah, I think Whatnot will be. It's a great opportunity, and you can get like.
Well, I was gonna say I tried to get my little shop on TikTok, and it was very difficult. They want barcodes for everything, and I mean, like way more than I think the average person. That's why it's so much drop shipping, right? Like I could sell my stuff on there, but then I got to go and get barcodes and like all of this stuff. And I just was like, that's not worth it to me right now. But if you're doing more like this eBay style, that feels like something I could do.
Yeah, I think a lot of folks are going to get on that. It's going to be a very popular thing. And keep in mind, it's not only for crafting or shoes. Like it's anything you are willing to, like if you're like a vintage person and you have vintage products, like you could definitely go on there and every day there's something new. I think it's like, I didn't see any vintage people on there, but for folks selling vintage, holy smokes, it could be huge. If you're like a deal hunter and like you go to garage sales and you get stuff there, I can see, man, that's a huge opportunity for you. You could have multiple shops on Whatnot catering to different folks. So I think the opportunity there is huge, and I think we'll see it grow a lot. So it's something for that. But I do have a couple of more ideas, and I don't know if they're good or not, but these are things that like Mark and I always discuss this because people always ask us, what are you doing new? What are you doing different? The whole hat bar concept is there, right? But if you're like a business that has a bar, like so let's say like if Corey, if you could do like a keychain bar, right? And let's say if you and Angie lived in the same state, and Angie's like, hey, I have a hat bar. I was almost thinking of you get a booth and you split it 50-50, and you literally have like 2 different bars and you do it versus. So to make it a Corey versus Angie and split the revenue and make it super fun and competitive and have 2 different bars. And the only reason to do that is so it reduces your expense exposure by half, but increases your revenue potential as well. And it's something new, it's something fun, and it'll really drive the crowd. And you really just have a lot of fun with it. I think it'll really allow you to do that.
So much fun. So I want to do this t-shirt bar idea. So I need to find somebody locally for craft fairs who has a hat bar or something else, and we can do like a tag team bar.
Yeah, I think a tag team bar would be so much fun,
Well,
and then
the experiential part is what gets the buyer in.
Yes.
The whole experience. You feel like you had a hand involved in making it. You got to pick the design. Maybe you got to press it. Help lining it up. Like the making takes we've done at trade shows are off the chain. People love it.
Totally.
And they'll pay to make their own product. Like, how better is that get? You don't have to do it.
You don't have to make it.
Yeah. But I mean, other than that, that was a fun idea. And I really want to be a part of something like I think it would be so much fun to do like at a craft show. But yeah, I think the biggest one is, there's so many, but I think the biggest one is stay visible, stay relevant, keep sharing your journey. Obviously look for made in USA products. I would now more than ever, obviously. But also look for unique products that everyone doesn't have. I think that's a bigger one. I think it's very easy to, go to a bigger supplier and find something, but you can do that. And being a supplier, this is this is probably me shooting me in my foot, but Mark and I have always been transparent. Go look for mills. Go look for a mill by you. Like there are, you know, wood manufacturers in the United States, and they might be willing to work with you for 50 units. You don't have to rely on MakerFlo as a supplier. Go make a unique product. Go make a unique shape. You can get into it, and see what you can do with it. You know, and I think it's an opportunity for everyone to get their feet wet a little bit with it.
Yeah.
So.
Oh my gosh, guys, this was a fantastic talk. I'm really glad that we all got together to talk about this. We were talking, and we just don't want to be the people who kind of shy away from difficult subjects because it's affecting our industry, and I think we need to talk about it. And I was really glad that John and Mark were willing to come and chat with me on my channel about it. So if you guys are watching this after it airs and you have more questions or thoughts, please leave those down in the comments, and I can respond, and I can always get John and Mark's opinion. Just email them and I can see what they think. Yeah, so I hope you guys enjoyed this. If you did, let us know in the chat. You guys have anything else?
Final thoughts?
No.
You got 2 sentences.
I mean, no, go for it. Be transparent in these times of difficulty. Be honest with your customers. Treat your customers like your best friend.
Yep.
That's what I'll leave you with. Treat them like your best friend. Don't be afraid to raise prices, and you'll be all right.
Yeah, I think so too.
Cool. I would say that I'd like to leave off with, I think we're going to get into tumultuous times, but one thing I always like to say is there's always opportunity. You know, and if you're being good, doing good, you know, if you're being good to yourself and thinking good on others, you'll find the goodness in any situation, and you'll find the opportunity to be successful, right? But it's just whether you're willing to step out of the boundary a little bit and let yourself take that opportunity. So I think in the times that are coming, you know, I would love for folks to think in that direction. Like, what's the opportunity? How can I still be good? And, you know, how can I still provide value and still make a business out of it?
Yeah. And we'll be waiting for your $200 million tumbler factory coming in several years.
Oh, yeah. Hey, and if anybody wants, you could write a check. We'll leave the address here. You can contribute to it. We'll give you a percentage.
Yeah, they'll make keychains as well.
Sure, we'll add that as a machine. Not a problem. You'll only get profits back if we're profitable, though. So just keep that in mind. So everyone's in it for the risk.
All right, guys, thank you so much for joining me. I am not able to end this video, so we're going to have Jesse do that. He's on the back end. But thank you so much, everybody, for joining us. Again, if you have any questions,